In this training video, we'll show you how to manage the users in your MarketSight account. These tasks can only be performed by account administrators. Every MarketSight account has at least one administrator who is usually the individual who first signed up for the MarketSight account and has overall responsibility for the account. If you are an account administrator, you will see and have access to the account administration menu, which can be accessed by clicking on your username here and clicking on Administration. You'll see that the menu on the blue bar changes to the Administration menu. The first page is the Users page. On this page, you can see how many seats you've purchased and how many you're using. You can see all the users in your account and set their individual privileges. And you can also create new users and activate or deactivate users. You can also filter and sort this list just like all other list pages in MarketSight. In particular, you may want to see only active users, or you may also want to see inactive and deleted users. By clicking on this down arrow, you can change the filter. By clicking on the column label, you can control the sorting of this list. To edit the settings for an existing user, just click on the name. This will bring up a window that will let you edit a user's settings. This is the same window we'll use to create a new user, so we'll cover these details while creating a new user. To add a new user to this account, click New here. Beginning on the Basics tab, we enter the username first, marysmith@company.com. The username field requires a unique name. We suggest you use a person's business email address for their username, as it will be easier for that person to remember. The first, middle, last, and email address fields are the remaining fields on this tab. We'll enter the first name, then the last, and finally the user's email address, which in this case is the same as her username. Notice that the checkbox next to User is active is automatically checked for all newly created users. To deactivate an existing user, just uncheck this box. Also, for existing users, a delete button will appear here, which you can use to delete the user ID. We should also check the box next to Send Login Information. This will tell MarketSight to send an email to the new user with a link to log in to MarketSight. When the new user clicks on that link, she will be prompted to change her temporary password to something she'll remember, and also set up her security question for automatic password retrieval. Therefore, there's no need to enter a password for this user, so we can skip the Password tab. This tab would be used if you wanted to change the password for an existing user. Now let's move on to the Groups tab. Groups are collections of users with access to the same resources. Once the user is a member of a particular group, that user inherits the privileges of that group. MarketSight puts all new users into the General Users group. We can see that Mary Smith is already included in that group. We can also see that there is one more group available called MarketSight Trainees that we can add Mary to. To add Mary to that group, drag and drop the group from the Available window to the Selected window, or click on the group name and use the arrows to move the group from one window to the other. Now let's click on the Privileges tab. First, we must decide if Mary is to be a full access user, a read-only user, or a key findings only user. Full access users have access to all MarketSight features available in an account. Read-only users can view and export items but cannot create or modify them. Key findings only users have access only to the key findings page and do not see any other MarketSight pages. Key findings and read-only user IDs are free, so you can create as many of those users as you'd like. You may need to purchase additional seats to create a new full access user. We'll set up Mary as a full access user. In addition to the user type, we can grant the user privileges by checking the box associated with the item we want the user to be able to create. We see that no checkboxes are checked for Mary. This can be a little confusing, but we don't need to check any of these boxes for Mary to be able to do these things, because she gets these privileges automatically because she's in the General Users group. The one privilege not being granted in that group is the ability to make dashboards public. That would need to be checked for Mary to make dashboards accessible to people without a MarketSight ID. The Dashboards feature, which is available only to subscribers of MarketSight's Enterprise Edition, is currently the only feature with this special privilege. A public dashboard is one that is open to any internet user and does not require a MarketSight user ID to access. Given the potential risks associated with exposing information to the public, this privilege must be explicitly granted to an individual or a group by the account administrator. It is therefore unchecked by default. We won't make any changes here since there's no need to duplicate the privilege settings already set up in groups. Another important thing to know is that privileges granted on the group and the individual levels are cumulative. That is, if Mary is a member of a group that has privileges to add crosstabs, and as a user she has privileges to add folders and data tables, then, as an individual, she has privileges to add all of those items. Let's move on to the final tab, the Contact Info tab. This tab allows us to fill in the user's contact information. By default, this tab is populated with account contact information. To fill in specific user contact information, we need to uncheck the checkbox next to Use Account Contact Information and complete the tab with the appropriate user information. Now that we have completed all the tabs, we can click OK to create the new user. Since we had the checkbox checked to send the user login information on the Basics tab, Mary will have just received an email with her username and a link that will enable her to log into MarketSight and reset her password. Now back on the user list page, we can see Mary's user account. If at any point we'd like to deactivate Mary's account, all we need to do is click on her name to edit her account. Then we uncheck the User is Active checkbox and click OK. Mary Smith would no longer be an active user. Now let's take a look at how to create groups in MarketSight. We start by clicking on Groups in the Administration menu. Here we see a list of all the groups created for this account. Again, groups are collections of users with access to the same resources. Once the user is a member of a particular group, that user inherits the privileges of that group. By default, all users are members of the General Users group. Let's create a new group by clicking on the new item in the action bar. The purpose of this group will be to enable some users to make dashboards public, a privilege that is not granted by default. There are 4 tabs on this dialog. On the Basics tab, we give the group a name and optionally a description. We'll call this group Public Dashboard Publishers. This feature, Role-Based Views, is covered in another training video. The purpose of this feature is to set up a global filter in this account for members of this group, such that when any member of this group views any item in MarketSight, the data that the user sees will be filtered according to these criteria. On the Members tab, we can specify which users or groups will be members of this group. On the left are the users and groups that are available to be added to this group. We'll move users and groups to the right to add them to this group. We can either drag and drop from left to right, or select an item on the left and use the arrows to move that item to the right. The next tab allows us to specify who can make changes to the group itself. We can leave this as it is. The final tab is where we set the privileges available to members of this group. As you recall, the reason we're creating this group is to enable a subset of the users in this account to make dashboards public. So we check this box, which is the only privilege not granted to all users in the General Users group. Now all members of this group will be able to make dashboards public. Then we click OK to create the group. Back on the list page, here's our group. Once we're finished with the administration tasks, just click Home to return to the main MarketSight application. That concludes this training video on managing users and groups. Thanks for watching.